So while this thing is loading up here, I do want to address the 40-year. Okay, I wasn't able to talk about it last Monday, but I kind of want to bring it up now before we start the presentation. It does not exist, guys. Okay, there's no 40-year mortgage that's coming out. I know that a lot of people were putting that in headlines and news articles, and so it becomes a little bit misleading. There was also loan officers saying that there was, which is crazy. That at least if you're within the the industry, you shouldn't be. At least know your stuff, or at least do the research before you post something like that. But pretty much there is no 40-year mortgage. It is a loan modification. Okay. So before I explain what a loan modification is, just so that you guys are aware, in order for a 40-year mortgage to really come into fruition, there's more that would need to be done besides HUD or Fannie and Freddie basically coming out and say that they're going to start doing it. Okay. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, they let me record this. Hey, good morning. The CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, basically they make the guides on what a qualified mortgage is. Okay. And a qualified mortgage are basically those mortgages that are conforming loans, right? Conventional, FHA, VA, those things. And specifically within their guides, it states that a qualified mortgage is something that is no more than 30 years. Okay, that's a qualified mortgage. So in order for HUD and Fannie and Freddie to be able to kind of maneuver around that, they would have to get with the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to kind of see how that could work in the future. So there's a little bit of things that would kind of go into it. Trust me, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I wish there was a 40-year. I've been saying it. I wish we could do a 40, 50, 60. Doesn't matter, right? Because people that assume that they're going to keep these loans for that long, it's just unrealistic that they are. And you're going to end up refinancing or anything like that. It's why investors, that's why interest-only loans are typically more lean towards for investors, because they don't care about that leverage, right? They want that return on investment. So it would have been the same thing with a 40-year, but unfortunately, that's not the case. A loan modification is basically once that person goes into default, the servicer that they have can now basically say, okay, there's specific things that they go through when they're doing a loan modification to lower the payment. Now, an extra step that they're going to take is basically extending that term an extra 10 years and giving them an extra 120 months to see if that will help the client make those homeowner make those payments without them actually having to foreclose on it. So they're basically just trying to put a stop to a foreclosure crisis or anything like that. This is something that Fannie and Freddie already had implemented before, so it's just HUD hopping on the bandwagon. But there is no actual 40-year loan product. I wish, but there isn't. Okay, we're gonna jump into share my screen, and we're gonna talk about down payment assistance programs in South Florida. Like I mentioned to you guys, I know most of you guys already kind of know these things, so we're gonna go through them relatively quickly. Okay, hey, that's me. All right, so the programs we'll be covering: Florida Housing, Hometown Heroes, HFA Miami-Dade, Canoa Fund. If you guys are not on mute, please mute. HFA Miami-Dade, Canoa Fund, MDEAT, Miami-Dade Public Housing Community Development, and Broward Home Buyer Purchase Assistance Program. Okay. So the first one's the Florida Bond. Okay, this is kind of one of my favorite ones behind Hometown Heroes, because we try to get clients into it as much as we can to help them utilize those down payment assistance funds. Of course, you can do FHA, USDA, and conventional. Minimum FICO is 640, and all borrowers must meet that requirement. Okay, every borrower that we have on the application has to be that 640. It utilizes household income, not income that we have on the application. This is very important for FHA buyers specifically, conventional not so much. Because when we're talking about household income, we're utilizing tax returns as well. And we'll kind of get into that in this point right here, in this bullet point. So the income limits, 1 to 2 person and 3+, vary by county. I only did Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, but the Florida Bond is for all of Florida. So you can utilize it for clients that are moving anywhere within Florida. Miami-Dade's 1 to 2 is 97,500. Their 3 plus is 112, 125. Then Broward's is 90, 7,000. And 104, 305. And then Palm Beach is 1 to 2, 92,000. And then 3 plus is 105, 800. Their purchase price limits, they do vary by county, but Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach are 382 and 194, non-targeted. Okay, so there is targeted and non-targeted areas that they kind of look at. The targeted areas are more so. The targeted areas are more so low-income areas. Very, very rare that you're actually going to find a property within those areas because they are basic. They're based off of specific census tracts, and those census tracts are maybe those blocks are like 2 by 2, 2 blocks by 2 blocks. So it's very difficult to find properties within those specific. So we always try to, when we're talking about these things, we always do the non-targeted because it is probably 99% of the time what we're going to be seeing. Cosigners are allowed, and this is not to be confused with a co-borrower. Okay, cosigners are basically not going to be on the title. They'll be on the mortgage, but they're not on the title. And they don't have rights to the property. Okay, that's the difference between a cosigner and a non-occupying co-borrower. Their income is not used towards the income limit. Okay, so this is pretty cool that Florida Bond has this. So if you get a cosigner and they make $200,000 a year, their income will not affect the threshold that we have here because it's only going to consider anybody that's living in the property. Okay. The non-purchasing spouse must qualify as a first-time home buyer. So basically, in the state of Florida, if you're married, your non-purchasing spouse, if they're not going to be on the application because their credit's not good or whatever the case is, they still would have to be considered a first-time home buyer. No cashback allowed to the borrower, which includes their earnest money deposit, and only gift funds can be returned to them. Okay, so if they're doing the Florida Bond and they get a bunch of seller credit, and they do have an EMD of $5,000, that EMD, instead of it being returned to them, will go towards their loan amount to lower that loan amount. Okay, there's ways around this. Typically, it's more apparent in Hometown Heroes, where in Hometown Heroes, if you're doing a VA, right, 100% financing, and then Hometown Heroes is covering the closing costs. So that EMD, whether it be 5 or 10 or 15, what we do is once we get the loan approval, it takes some convincing to do with the seller or the listing agent, right? But once we get the loan approval and we know that everything's good with the buyer, we'll then say, hey, can we lower the earnest money deposit? So then at that point, if it's 5,000, we'll lower it from 5,000 to maybe $500 or whatever the case is, and then that would be the only thing that the borrower has to come in with, and then the title company will give them a check back at closing, and that way they save their earnest money deposit. Taxes and tax transcripts are used to verify eligibility as a first-time home buyer. This is very important if the client is going FHA. So we see this scenario a lot, right, where people have Schedule C, or clients have Schedule C income and they have negative income. Well, they'll have negative 10, negative 15, negative $20,000 on their Schedule C. FHA requires, if there is any sort of negative income on the tax returns, we have to utilize that in the application as their self-employment income, right? And so that's a negative for somebody. If they make $70,000 a year at W-2, but they showed negative 20, that means that we're qualifying based off of only $50,000. So usually if I have an FHA client and they're doing Florida Bond, we do want to get those tax returns up front to make sure that there is no Schedule C income. And if it is, it's not negative because it will affect them in terms of their approval. These things are unforgivable and must be paid back, okay? Typically, I always say paid during refinance or sale. We've gotten the question before where it basically say, well, what about if I don't refinance or sell? That's bullshit, right? We all know that typically right now rates are a little bit higher. You are going to refinance, but let's play devil's advocate. You don't. You stay with that interest rate for the next 30 years. Once your first loan is done and paid off, the balloon for the second will come into play. So you would, theoretically speaking, have to pay that $10,000 in 30 years, no matter what. Okay. So the conventional TBA product, you guys may not know about this one, but it is within Florida housing as well. It's $10,000 or 3%, 4% and forgivable. There was a 5% forgivable option in the past. It may be coming back in once rates stabilize a little bit, but there is a forgivable option, and this is actually an actual grant. Okay, so you guys know that there's a difference between a 0% interest second mortgage and a grant. The second mortgage does affect your CLTV, your combined loan to value. The grant does not, okay? Conventional only, that's why it's conventional TBA, minimum FICO 640, 1003/application income, not household income. So we don't have to worry about those tax returns. We're going to go specifically based off of what's on that 1003, which means that if the client has overtime and bonuses and we don't need to use them, we don't use them. We can go specifically off their base pay to qualify them and still keep them below these income limits, which are typically a little bit higher than what the Florida bond is. You'll see 112, 117, 104, 108, 105, 110. And then the purchase price limits vary by county, but Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, 491, 261. So this is kind of similar to the Florida bond in that it's going to give you $10,000, but it has a little bit more flexibility. So if you have a higher income bar, or they're looking at a higher purchase price, this one may be the one that works for them. This typically carries a higher interest rate than what the Florida bond will, but it helps, right? Cosigners are allowed, but the income is used towards the income limit because it is application income. Non-purchasing spouse does not have to be a first-time home buyer in this one. Same thing, no cash back. You don't have to worry about taxes. The 10K is not forgiven, like I mentioned to you guys. So on the previous one with the Florida bond, same thing, refinance or sell, or balloon in 30 years. And then the 3%, 4%, or 5% is forgiven at a rate of 20% per year. Okay, so by year one, 20% of that 3% or 4% will be forgiven. And then year 2, 40, 60, 80, and then 100. It will be fully forgiven after 5 years, but the rate is typically higher than the 10K. Okay, so it depends more or less where that purchase price is for that person and realistically how much money they need. And those are the things that we kind of look at on our end and kind of see, is that, I know that you want the grant option because it sounds better because you're not going to have to pay that back. But if the rate is higher, you end up paying more down the line, especially if you keep this for more than 5 years anyway, right? Then as opposed to just doing the 10,000 and then paying it whenever you refinance or sell the property. So usually, in my opinion, the 10K is typically going to be the better option because the rate is lower. Is you're only going to do the forgivable one if you don't plan to refinance or sell within 5 years anyway, right? Because if you do it in 2 years, you're still paying back 60% of what you borrowed, and you still paid a higher interest rate within those first 2 years, right? So it just depends. So Hometown Heroes, you can see I updated it up to 5% or $35,000. Now I know that starting July 1st, before I start this, I know that starting July 1st, they're removing the occupation list on here from what or at least from what I've read. My opinion, right, and this is not confirmed yet, which is why I haven't really put anything out. My opinion is that if they are removing the occupation list, the guidelines for this may be a little bit more strict because right now the barrier to entry is basically 640 FICO, below the income limit of 136 to 146, and being on the occupation list of whatever that being a frontline worker is, depending on what they have there. Those are the 3 barriers to entry. The hardest one is typically being on that occupation list, right? It's very specific to who they give the down payment assistance to. If they remove that and they just say 640 FICO, 136K income in Broward County, 146 in Miami-Dade, and then all over Florida in general, that money's going to run out really, really fast. So in my opinion, I think that there's going to be more to the guidelines that they put together. If they are opening this up to everybody, they may have 2 separate ones where they're doing still Hometown Heroes and they keep those guys the same. And then for every other Florida worker, maybe these are the stipulations or whatever the case is. But they're set to come out July 1st. I know that they're going to be doing trainings relatively soon on the new guides and stuff like that. So once we do get more info, I'll let you guys know. But trust me, I don't think it's going to be that easy. Like people are saying, where we're just removing the occupation list and now it's a go, right? I don't think that's going to be the case, but we don't know. Right, I may be wrong. So as of right now, you still have to be a valid occupation and full time. Okay. But before we get to that, right, you're doing FHA, VA, USDA conventional, minimum FICO 640, 1003/application income, not household, so you don't need tax returns. There is income limits, which is the highest of all the programs, right? 146, 136, and 138 in Palm Beach. There's loan amount limits, not purchase price limits. And those loan amount limits are typically conforming loan limits, right? So on FHA is 556 and on conventional 727. Cosigners are allowed, which is not to be confused with co-borrower, but their income is used towards the income limit. So we have to qualify them, if we have to make sure that the cosigner is still below or helps with the borrower still be below these income limits. Must be a valid occupation and full-time, and this does get tricky with nurses, okay? So with a nurse, you can be traveling or per diem and you could be working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and still not be classified as full-time within your job, okay? Because you could be per diem where you're only required to work 2 shifts per week or 4 shifts per month or whatever the agreement is with that employer. So to them, you are not considered full-time, even though you pick up extra shifts, right? So if that is the case as a nurse, you're not going to qualify for Hometown Heroes. A lot of people don't understand this part to it, okay? They're very specific when it comes to being full-time, okay? That's the same thing where if you are a nurse and you have 2 part-time positions and you put together, you make 40 hours a week or even more than that, you're still not full-time in one of them. So you won't qualify for Hometown Heroes. It will bite you in the butt. So I usually try to ask that, especially when it comes to nurses. Non-purchasing spouse does not have to be a first-time home buyer. No cashback allowed to the borrower. So we try to do the same trick that we do with the earnest money deposit, right? That I told you guys about, where basically if we see that the client wants to get their EMD back, instead of putting it towards the loan amount, we'll talk to the listing agent to try to see how we can get an addendum to lower the EMD. Not forgiven. So application/1003 to verify first-time homebuyer eligibility. It is not forgiven. So same thing. There's a balloon in 30 years, or it's paid when you refinance or sell the property. Veterans don't have to be first-time homebuyers, and they don't need a certificate of eligibility. Okay, so I've closed 2 veterans, not on a VA because they may not have their COE, or specifically, I think they both didn't have their COEs yet because they hadn't done enough time, which is fine. As long as you have your DD 214, which pretty much every veteran does, we're able to utilize the Hometown Heroes program and still do FHA, and they still come in with minimum down, okay? There was one other thing I wanted to point out on this that it's not here. The $35,000, they did increase it, but it's still 5%, guys, right? So the only way that client's going to get 30 or 35 is if they're at a higher price point, if they're above 500. So we're talking about anywhere between 556, 657. That's when they're going to get, 5% of that is much greater than the 25 that we're showing. So they increased it to 35,000, but it's still 5%. So the client's at 400, 450, and they're waiting for the guidelines to update. Tell them it won't affect them, unfortunately. So HFA of Miami-Dade. So this one is the one that recently went from 10,000 to 15,000 down payment assistance. This is pretty similar to the TBA, the conventional TBA, but it's for more government. So you have, the Florida bond. So you have FHA, USDA, VA, and low income conventional only. So you can't have somebody, if you have somebody that's looking at Miami-Dade and they're going conventional, they won't be able to use the HFA of Miami-Dade. They would probably have to use a conventional TBA or the Florida bond because those have higher income limits. This is only for conventional clients that are 80% area median income, which would be 62,320 in the county, Miami-Dade County. So all borrowers must meet this, the minimum FICO 640 and 660. And there is DTI restrictions based on credit. So if the client is below 680, right, 640, in this case, 640 to 679, their debt to income ratio is capped at 45%. If they're at 680 plus, their debt to income ratio gets pushed up to, gets capped at 50. So they get an extra 5% of DTIs, which is basically going to improve their approval amount if they have a higher credit score. Okay. Same thing, 1003 application income, similar income limits to the Florida bond, 97,500, 112, 125, and then the 80% area median income for conventional, 62,320. Same purchase price limit as the bond. Same thing, targeted and non-targeted areas. Cosigners are allowed on government loans only. So FHA and VA, you only really get your spouse, but FHA, USDA, VA, not on the conventional one. And their income is not used towards the income limit. So this one is kind of similar to the Florida bond, where you can get a cosigner if you do an FHA, Miami-Dade, and they not have to worry about their income limit or their income being much higher than what the actual limit is here. No cashback allowed to borrow, but this does not include the EMD. So HFA of Miami-Dade is the only one that basically says if you're getting an overage or you have an overage and you have your EMD in there, you could still get it back at closing, okay? Same thing, application /1003 to verify first-time homebuyer eligibility, and then not forgiven, so 30-year balloon or paid when you refinance or sell. My least favorite, or one of my least favorites, because I actually found my least favorite, which we're going to talk about soon. But Chenoa Fund, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's FHA only. That gives you 3.5% or 5% down payment assistance. Okay. There is no income limits. There is an adjustment for borrowers that are above 135% AMI. There are no DTI overlays as long as DU run. So FHA, on a FHA loan, you can go all the way up to 56.99 if you wanted to. And Chenoa Fund basically says that's okay as long as DU is running. But there cannot be a huge payment shock. Okay, the payment shock is 125% of whatever their current rent is. So if their rent is only $1,500 and they're looking at a $2,500 mortgage, they won't be able to push it all the way to 56.99% DTI. In order to get there, they will be capped at 45% DTI. Okay, which is a lot of people. So this overlay itself within Chenoa Fund really kind of minimizes the amount that people are getting a pre-approved for, because we have to kind of fall within that 45% DTI. Cosigners are allowed. This is the most flexible DPA because it's basically, for the most part, FHA. Like, as long as FHA says it's okay, they're okay with it. There really isn't anything extra like you would see on the Florida bond or HFA or anything like that. But this has much higher interest rates than the other programs do. Right now, you'll probably be in the mid to high sevens if you're looking at Chenoa Fund. They do have forgivable and repayable options. The repayable option requires for it to be added to your monthly payment, and you'll pay back more than you borrow. So if you're doing the 3.5%, let's say you're getting 100% financing, and you're doing 3.5% Chenoa Fund on, let's say, 300,000, that's 10,500. After those payments, because of the amount of interest you're paying for that monthly, you probably end up paying back $15,000 to $20,000. So about half to double, or about 150 to 200% more than what you would actually borrow. Okay, so that's not really ideal for a lot of clients. And then the forgivable option does have higher interest rates, right? And so what happens is, if you're borrowing 3.5%, so with this program specifically, if you have, if you're doing 3.5 or 5% down payment assistance, right, there is stipulations, and it kind of lowers the amount of assistance you'll get depending on different things, right? So if there is no income limits, you see I put here, it says adjustment for borrowers above 135 AMI. So now from 5%, maybe that's only 4%, right? And then you're above the you're above the payment shock thing. Oh no, this doesn't give you an adjustment. You just have to be below 45. But you're doing the 5%. You have higher income, and then on top of that, you're using the forgivable option. So by the time the 5% is all said and done, you're really only gaining as a borrower about 2.5, maybe, give or take, with all these adjustments that Chenoa Fund adds onto it. So it may not be beneficial for you to kind of do that. 2.5% of 300. You're looking at $8,000. You might as well do the Florida bond, right? So not my favorite one. We do have MD, which I really like. It's FHA, USDA, VA, and conventional. There is no minimum FICO. It is household income, not income that we have on the application, which, remember, that's going to really affect FHA buyers if they do put Schedule C income on their tax returns and stuff like that. Those income limits will vary by household size, by AMI. It is very broad, their income limit sheet. So we're just going to go basically 80% area median income, right? Which is where you would get the full 28,500. From one person household is 54,600 to 8-person household is 103,000. So if you're in between that, it'll be an income limit between those two ranges. And then if you're 140% area median income, which is where you'll get, which is the maximum of the income limit that you could be, you'll get 14,500. And they're 95,620 on a one person, all the way up to 180 on an 8-person. There is no purchase price limit. You do not have to be a first-time home buyer. Like I mentioned, your down payment assistance varies, but depending on if you're below the 80% area median income or above it. You must invest 1 to 3% of the purchase price, and that can be gifted to you. Okay, it doesn't have to be out of your pocket. 1% if you're 80% or below, 3% if you're 140% or below. And then taxes and tax transcripts are used to verify eligibility as a first-time home buyer. It is forgiven after 20 years, and these do have double underwriting, so it will take a little bit longer to close. Typically, I say 6 to 8 weeks, because they will not start processing the file until we have our loan approval, our appraisal, all the client documents in and everything like that. And if it takes us 2 weeks and it takes them 3 to 4 weeks to give a decision, that's already 6 weeks. Okay, and that's on a quick loan approval. Talking about a 2-week loan approval, then plus 3 to 4 weeks for them. That's automatically 6 weeks that we have to start with as the minimum in order to be able to get these things done. But the reason why I like MD is because they are pretty flexible. As long as you're below the income limits, that's really their one thing that they care about. It is forgiven after 20 years, and they do allow you to stack. Okay, meaning a lot of these down payment assistance programs, like I mentioned, they're second mortgages, right? And so what happens is, if you're trying to get 2 second mortgages, who's going to really go down to the third position, right? A lot of these down payment assistance programs, they don't want to do that. MD will go down to the 3rd position so that we can get an actual other second mortgage to stack it. Okay, so that's pretty cool that they do that. They'll go all the way down to, I believe, 7 or 8th position, but they're one of the few that really kind of go down in lien position. This one is my least favorite. So it's this one in Chenoa Fund. So this is pretty similar to MD, and I put this on the slideshow because I did see a lot of people posting on social media that Miami-Dade was giving up to $35,000 down payment assistance, and I kind of wanted to address it when I did this presentation. So pretty similar to MD. The real thing that kind of sticks out here, the two things is, one, it's not unforgivable, right? You do have to pay it back in 30 years, or pay whenever you refinance or sell the property. But the important thing that comes from this is that there is something that we call shared equity. Okay, you cannot sell the home within 6 years unless you want to split the profits with Miami-Dade, right? So what that means is, within year 1 to year 3, if you sell your property, Miami-Dade will take 100% of the profits, not up to $35,000. They're going to get their $35,000 plus all your profits. So if you make $100,000 a year, $100,000 in 3 years from the equity of your home, they're going to take the $100,000. Let's say that's all in with the 35. They just profited $65,000 off of a homeowner. Okay, it's not something that I would typically recommend to clients, because it does have very similar stipulations to MD. So I might as well try to get the person into MD, where I know there is no shared equity. If something happens within a couple years, they'll be able to sell their home without an issue. From year 4 to year 6, you will have to split 50% of the property with Miami-Dade. So really, the only time you're going to keep 100% of the profit of selling your property is if you don't sell within the first 6 years. After year 6, you can sell and you'll keep 100%. Not really ideal. It does have double underwriting. The cool thing within the Miami-Dade Public Housing Community Development is there's other things that are in it. There is housing development, right, for small businesses. So for a lot of realtors, if you guys have an actual business name, you guys can start yourselves getting funding from the local municipalities, whether that be Miami-Dade, whether that be Broward. Every single state has its own small business organization that helps with housing development, and these are accessible to you guys as realtors, right? So I would suggest that you guys start doing research. I think the biggest issue with affordability right now is not high rates. I don't think low rates are going to be able to help with that, even if we get rates down to the threes again. I think what really helps affordability is more homes on the market. And so if you guys, as small business owners, can start tapping in and building affordable housing, one, you're going to be doing your community a great thing, and then two, you're going to make a lot of money doing it, and it's going to be something that you're benefiting off of, because there's a lot of people that come into the communities that we live in, and they're doing the same thing, utilizing the same system or the same programs that the counties and the states are offering, and they're selling it at markups, and they're giving it to, and that's how we're really getting whatchamacallit, gentrification. Okay. There also is assistance for condo owners as well. So if you have a client that you sold a condo to in the past, and now they're getting a special assessment, which is probably going to be much more apparent within the next couple of years, as every condo is going to be required to have 10% reserves, they're going to start increasing their HOA fees. Miami-Dade does have assistance for those condo owners to be able, they'll give them a 0% interest loan to help with those special assessments if there are any that the client can't afford. Okay. We're almost done, guys. I promise. I think this is the last slide. This Broward HPA, hold on, Deborah, I'll start taking questions now. Up to $80,000 DPA, or down payment assistance, is Broward County. This is the most strict because it gives the most money. Okay. That's the easiest way to put it. They're giving you $80,000. It is a second mortgage, but it does become forgiven after 15 years. Every year, 1/15 of it gets forgiven. So if you sell in 7 years, you're only paying back 8 years worth of whatever you borrowed, right? So you would have to do the 80,000, divide that by 15, and then see what that is every single year that gets forgiven, what that number is. The DTRs are very, very strict. They are very hard on that 45% debt to income ratio. We can't be 45.5. We can't be 46. We can't, unless it's FHA. FHA, they'll allow 46, but conventional 46, you can't do 47, 48, can't do any of that. They are hard stopping at 45. And if that client is above 38 on the front end, which is basically the housing expense, they will consider it if the buyer has excellent credit, which is above 700, and the buyer is currently paying rent to the same amount or more than what their mortgage is going to be. Okay. They do have a purchase price limit of 382,194, and their AMIs are from 1 to 8, 50,800 to 95,800. When it comes to this program specifically, a lot of these clients, if they're able to qualify for it, is because they are low income clients, right? And so what happens is, for the most part, even though that purchase price limit is at 382, you're probably going to have clients that are getting approved at 170, 180. 195, right? And so within those price points, it's mostly condos, and mostly condos without reserves. Okay, it's important. Okay, stay with me on this. Even though you're getting $80,000 down payment assistance, if that client finds a condo that does not have reserves, they will still have to put 10% down. Okay, it's not because of Broward, it's because of conventional guidelines. Okay, conventional guidelines state that when we're doing what's called a limited review, which is basically a condo with no budget, their maximum combined loan to value, because this is a second mortgage, their maximum combined loan to value is 89.99, which means that they have to come in with 10%. Okay, so we try to tell clients this: you're not going to be able to just come in with 0% down, because they do require that you invest 3%. Not a big deal, but if you do get a condo that is a limited review that doesn't have a budget, now you're coming in with minimum 10, because we have to follow conventional guidelines no matter what. And that's the issue that a lot of clients have when it comes to this program. Okay. 36 minutes, and I felt like I flew through that. Oh man, I wish we could have taken a little bit, taken it a little bit slow, but I try to, be conscious of you guys' time on a Monday morning. But I can send you guys copies of the presentation. I would just need you guys to email me, so that way I know who to send it to. Deborah, you had a question?
Let me see if I can explain it. Okay, you were saying something about, as a realtor, we could invest in property or build in the community. So
Yes.
how would we do that? We would take out loans or borrow money?
Yes. So
with the building?
Miami-Dade, yeah. So within the public housing community development, which you would have to get with them and kind of see what the steps would be for you
Uh-huh.
as a small business, but they do have housing development funds. So they would give you the loan to be able to build affordable housing for people. And we're not talking about single families, right? You could utilize
Like
this money.
multi-families,
You could utilize-
multi-family?
yeah, you could utilize this money to do units, like, 10,
Yeah.
15, 20 units. You just gotta go start off at public housing community development or with the public housing community development of Miami-Dade and see and give them a call and email them and kind of see what the steps are, what you need to do, what you need to accomplish. You might have to get with a contractor ahead of time as well to make sure that they're going to be on board. But yes, you guys could do this. It's available. And not to plug, well, I don't really care, but yes, to plug NAREB. I learned about this a year and a half ago during one of their conferences, the Midwinter Conference, that every single state has a place or an organization that you are able to get their funds from them to build affordable housing. And that's how some people across the United States are doing that. And that's how a lot of these builders, developers, a lot of people think that they just have a bunch of, billionaires sitting in one room. And that's the case for some of them, right? But when you're first starting off, you can utilize local government funds, right? You can utilize SBA loans that people aren't aware about, that you could do 10% down on an SBA loan, right? So now you're not talking about 20-25% on a commercial build out, right? You're talking about 10%. So if it's $1 million, you push together 100,000 between a few people, 5 or 6 of you guys that all look the same. You can start doing affordable housing, just utilizing an SBA loan, but doing the housing development specifically through Miami-Dade, they may do 100% financing. You got to double check with them.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, guys, email me directly. I've tried in the past to take snippets because there's so many people in here today. It's going to be hard for me to be able to actually see everybody that's here and make a full list of them to send it. So just email me and I'll send you directly the presentation. There are some things that I talked about on here that aren't really in the presentation. So any questions that you have or anything like that, you can always give me a call and we can talk about it. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys for being here. I hope, I think I did a presentation not too long. Yes, I did the presentation not too long ago. This is another one. I like this kind of format for you guys because I feel like now I'm really providing some sort of value for you guys as businesses to kind of help you continue to make sales and stuff like that. We usually talk about data points and we'll continue to do that because that's also important. Like unemployment is starting to finally spike up, which means that we are now leaning into a recession, which is going to help mortgage rates soon and stuff like that. But anything that you guys need from us throughout this week, just give us a call, shoot us a text, email, whatever the case is. Thank you guys so much for joining us and we'll see you next Monday.
Thank you.
This was good. Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.